pretty important but open agenda, so we can talk about things in any real order. And I'd asked Jonathan if he could be with us, because the sheriff and I were talking earlier today about what kind of coordination has been going on so far between the county, the city, and Cornell and Ithaca College police agencies on what happens if we have to do enforcement on large parties. And one of the questions that came up was what kind of liability issues arise if, say, Ithaca College is assisting Tompkins County Sheriff's deputies in addressing a party. And so, Jonathan, if you want to jump in and talk to that issue, I thought it'd be informative for the rest of the committee. You're on mute.
Sorry. This is something I've spoken quite a bit about to the folks at Environmental Health, which is generally Liz and Skip and also Frank, because obviously we're anticipating that the big party is going to be an issue, particularly in College Town. One basic thought is that someone from the Department of Health coming in at a big party saying, I'm from the Department of Health, wake it up, is not going to be effective. It really needs to be law enforcement. The second thing is that certainly in my experience, when law enforcement shows up at a party, people tend to disperse. So that tends to be effective in and of itself. Obviously, the law enforcement can inform them that either they're in excess of the number of people that are permitted at the time, now 50, or they're in violation of the 6-foot separation distances, and almost all parties are in violation of that, and ask them to break up. And frankly, that's usually pretty effective in and of itself. One of the bigger issues is the issue of repeat parties, you know, where one home is generally a gathering place for party goers, or and they're oftentimes, you know, there's parties in the same place. One of the interesting things is holding the landlord responsible is really tough in this situation, because normally the threat of a landlord is ultimately to evict the tenant, but with COVID-19, they're not allowed to evict the tenant, so it kind of gives them a catch-22. So, you know, we have been talking, and I'm not sure there's a great solution. There's a whole bunch of different options and how we deal with the issue of the kind of continuing, you know, the parties where you break it up, but the next day there's the party the same place, that kind of thing. Obviously, law enforcement coming by, most of these will be in the city, frankly, would be helpful, but how we'll enforce it against individuals is tough, identifying who the individuals are and who's responsible for these parties. The issue with, you know, the colleges, we have to work out with the colleges, you know, what enforcement they might be willing to do off campus while they're deputized. They don't generally leave the campus. You know, it's complicated in terms of any police agency working for another police agency under their direction. I mean, they can do that, but how much they'll do that, we're not sure. And Liz, when I last talked, I think yesterday, was going to try to get together a meeting which would at least involve the city to discuss the College Town issue of the large parties. I'm not sure I'd be happy to answer any more questions and stuff, but, you know, it's something we've definitely talked about a lot and considered the possibilities. I think we'll kind of learn as we go, but it's going to have to obviously involve law enforcement because they'll be the most effective in this situation.
Yeah, I guess I'd add the comment that I think most students will be compliant with what the requirements are. I think it's going to be a small group that is going to be intent on their right to hold large gatherings and party and drink a lot. So, you know, we need to be prepared for it. If it doesn't happen, that would be wonderful. But I think it's great, all the steps we can take for a concerted response and a coordinated response. And certainly the Cornell and Ithaca College police departments, if they can help with that and do it in a coordinated way, I think we're going to be far better off. And of course, this is the last line of defense, that there's going to be lots of messaging. There's going to be compacts between the campuses, the schools, and the students. There should be warnings. And when it comes down to it, yeah, then I think the last line is the police. They have to come in and make sure this doesn't happen. Sheriff, do you have anything you want to say or add?
Thanks, Rich. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'll just add, our involvement with Cornell students is extremely limited. We almost come into contact with them never. Ithaca College, though, is a little bit different. We do have Kendall Ave and Pennsylvania Ave in that area where we do have involvement with them quite frequently. Our relationship over the last several years has been really good. They don't usually cause us too much problems, and they do shut down when we ask them to. So I don't anticipate a huge problem, but we'll be there to respond. I did talk to Dave Honan, Chief of Cornell Police, today. Kind of talked with him a little bit about this. They are doing quite a bit as far as testing, COVID testing of their students, which I didn't realize until today. So at least a lot of that will be addressed, but we'll continue to work together with both campuses and do whatever we have to do to get things taken care of if there's any issues.
Good. And Jason, I see you wanted to say something.
Yes, I just want to add, Rich and everyone, I mean, one other component to this is constant communication with the universities and higher ed themselves. Even though it's off campus, one of the pieces of dialogue that we've had from early on is, yep, they're off campus, but this is an issue that everyone needs to take responsibility. And they've been receptive to that, understanding that they're trying to change their I think Derek or maybe Rich mentioned that the social contracts that they're having with their students, which is also expanding off of campus, right? I mean, so they're fully aware that even though students are off campus, they're still under their purview, and they have a sense of responsibility to communicate to them and work with us on that. So, that communication will be out there. And if you do have those repeat issues again, it's going to, you can bet we're going to be talking with higher ed and our counterparts there saying, hey, we need you to help with this because this is an important issue. And they want to minimize risk as well. So I just think that's an important piece to it. It's just not about us enforcing. It's about the higher ed also taking a responsibility in the enforcement piece of it.
Absolutely. This has to be coordinated. I agree. Yeah. I would say that this has probably been the biggest constituent question area is what in the world we're going to be doing in regard to this. And there's a lot of planning. I think we have to work pretty hard at making sure that message is getting out. And I see several legislators are waiting to talk. Henry, share with us.
Yes, since my area, I cover both IC and Cornell, people are really concerned about it. And we know the steps they're taking, but we also know that Ithaca College Police would not leave campus unless IPD asked them to. And that Cornell Police also cannot enforce off campus. And so the only way to enforce things is through the police office. Also, Jonathan, you talked about initially liability. I didn't hear you talk about liability at all. What was your analysis about liability?
Sure. Rich's question was more about liability. I think initially their liability concern was if IC or Cornell officers would enforce off campus, then, and in the traditional thing, and you kind of referred to it before, where a police agency is acting outside their jurisdiction under the direction of a different police agency, like in a mutual aid situation, or in our situation where, let's say, the Ithaca police would ask the IC to come, off their campus, or we would ask Cornell to come off the campus, then they could essentially be working at our direction, and the potential for liability, which is kind of similar to it is in any mutual aid situation, where if a police agency, and it includes fire departments, et cetera, are working under your direction, then you could have liability for errors that are made in judgment, even if they're the ones that are carrying out the tasks. So, when somebody does come off or, does act on the request of another agency, whether it's another fire department or police department, et cetera, there's always the issue of, well, what happens, if there's an injury, damage to equipment, that kind of thing. And that's an issue that, it's a potential issue. But that's the concern.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Anna, welcome, and welcome to your dog. I saw on your deck. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so he's in the teething phase of puppydom. So yeah, I can't really leave him unattended. So sorry for the distraction, but
No, it's a good one.
good. So the comment that I'm getting the most, and I think it's really legitimate concern and frankly just incredible fear, and particularly among the older population in my district. And since Cornell is also in my district, I'm hearing a lot. But particularly pertaining to parties, someone actually said, is there a possibility of banning or creating an ordinance on, parties, that it's just a matter of time? There was one yesterday, a big rager from what I read, and it was either mine or Rich, your district, skateboarding in the street and drinking outside, and very not, no masks, no social distancing. It seems to be, I don't want to vilify anyone, but it seems to me that, the more students we have, the more of those we can expect. And how are we handling parties, specifically enforcement off campus? And I've reached out to IC in Cornell. Hopefully we'll talk to Cornell. The message from IC was, if you live off campus, you are not allowed in the residential halls on campus. And, do the math. That means that if people want to see their friends, they will go off campus. So yeah, enforcement, possible ordinances, bans, county, city, any thoughts?
Well, there is a noise ordinance.
Not more than a
There
noise.
was a lot of question there, Anna. But yeah,
Specifically with respect to enforcement of parties, around parties.
well, that's why I was having the discussion with the sheriff earlier, is that I think that we're going to be far better off if we continue the conversations with Cornell and the city and Ithaca College to make sure there's no gap and that there's consistent treatment of students who are on campus and off campus, so that the messaging is consistent and the treatment is consistent. And that we're flexible, that we watch it and we see what's working, we share information across agencies, and that we do the best we can. Because I think our constituents' fears are very legitimate. This is something to worry about.
So yeah, that is true. Sharing information is true. I guess, Jonathan, I'm curious, legally speaking, can ordinances or bans be created, or is that not constitutional? I would
Sure.
assume it's not, but I figured
I
that.
talked a little about this before you were on, but so in terms of the county doing regulation, in terms of COVID-19, if we were to add anything additional under our executive order, for example, we'd need approval from the State Department of Health. In terms of municipalities acting through an ordinance or something like that, that's a little different. I mean, municipalities do have noise ordinances, et cetera. They'd have to kind of look at it, how they would by ordinance regulate parties, whether by noise or by, for example, so only allowing so many people to gather, that's a bit tricky. But in terms of the county, the only real county method of doing it would be under our executive power, and it would need approval from the State Department of Health.
Okay. All right, Martha?
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for letting me chime in here. So I think we should consider whether we want to ask the state for that. And I'm not sure exactly what we'd want to ask for, but if that's what we think we need and could enforce, I think that should be on the table. I also want to say that I think this is decidedly not just a student issue, and with all due respect, we've had complaints from the crown jewel of Tompkins County, that is the town of Dryden, and not students, or maybe graduate students, but not your typical, not 20-year-olds. So I think that, yeah, the fears are real. I think if we had a very, very clear phone number and it's on prominently on the website for the health department and stays on the front page of the health department, here's where you call if you see a party of more than 10 or whatever the number is now, if you see a party that raises concerns. I know it's there somewhere buried. I've been in touch with Brian and others about the Dryden parties. So if that could be put clearly, here's where you call, and not send you to the state's web form that who knows when that shows up. So I think that will go a long way to giving people some confidence, even if they never use it. There's the number if I see something that makes me uncomfortable.
Okay, Ann?
Thank you also for letting me chime in here, Rich. So similar to what Martha said, I was just writing up an email that was saying that same thing. Looking at, I've had so many constituents already come talk to me or call me. I won't say come, they didn't come to my house, but call in or email me, or they're on Facebook, and including people who are employed by Cornell and Ithaca College, who are at risk of not going back to work, which I was quite surprised about. They are really scared about the students coming back. And a lot of them are actually saying it's a mistake. It's a mistake that we're doing this. So I think a lot of them don't have the information so far that we have, but still, I think we need to look at this. And to Jonathan's comment about going to a party, and I think it was Jonathan that said that, like law enforcement showing up, and that was before COVID. But now during COVID, the damage is already done. We're not talking about going to a party, breaking it up before somebody gets hurt, before something happens. The damage could already be done. And then somebody in the community, one of them gets sick, somebody in the community gets sick. And so this is a lot different. So I personally would like to see some type of strict enforcement of not just going and breaking up a party, of you get everybody's name and they get appearance tickets, or they all get fines, if they're not adhering to the state guidelines. And the sooner we do that, then that's going to be the type of thing that is going to stop students from doing that. Otherwise, if it's just a location, they're going to switch. I know I was in college, and they're not stupid. They're just going to switch the location and then switch the location again. So I think we need to do something really strict. Otherwise, we're not protecting them, and we're not protecting our community as best we can. Thank you.
Okay, Mike?
So I'm going to start by saying I appreciate what everybody's saying. I understand that the fear is real for a lot of people. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't take a step back and actually ask maybe a couple larger questions, kind of like, I'm not actually sure that we should be using police to enforce this at all. I mean, it seems to me the police have a lot to do already before COVID-19. We haven't expanded our police force. We haven't added people to it. So I don't know if, it's not that I don't think the sheriff's department can handle it. I just don't know if they should be the one handling it. I look back to what we kind of did, and I didn't really agree with this other thing, but we did it. We funded this ranger program to put people in the gorges to stop people from swimming. It was apparently pretty effective to get people to stop swimming in the gorges. It just seems to me that sending police to try to break up every party, and it's just, I'm trying to kind of lower the level of getting police involved in situations where they escalate. I mean, they've got enough kind of to do without going to a party where there's just a people hanging out. I'm trying to reconcile this whole idea that the discussion around students become rather ugly. For a lot of these students, this is their home, and we're saying to them, "Yeah, you're not really welcome at your home." And I have a big problem with that. These folks live here 10 months out of the year, and we're saying to them, "No, you're diseased somehow," when they're not. They're just coming back. And I'm reading this stuff online, and I understand people are afraid, but it's kind of like what you learned in sex ed. It just takes one person to get you infected. Same idea here. It doesn't. That one student from some place may come in, but that one person could come from any place. It could be anybody. So this idea that all this fear is being generated, I kind of feel that in a way the government is kind of causing that. Not the government, I mean the state government. We're saying that these students are coming back, but I'm listening to Cornell saying, listen, we're going to test every single person that comes back. We're going to do that. Then 14 days. They seem to have a pretty good handle on the plan. And for all this time, for the last 5 months, we were saying testing, 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 that's key. Well, yeah, I still believe that. I don't know why we're kind of moving off that message. We're moving into the message of people aren't going to be able to have a party. Well, I think that's going to be very hard to maintain. We're already seeing that that's very hard to maintain. And I had heard 10 people. I thought it was 50 people now that we were allowed to have gatherings of. And if we're going to start suspending people's right to get together, I don't know who we're actually going to get to enforce that. And I frankly don't think it should be the police. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I don't know. I just really feel like everything I've been reading lately is very anti-student. And this idea that the colleges are just opening because these kids are dollar signs too, is frankly, I think way off base and way off the mark of why colleges even operate. So, thanks.
Mike, you said a lot there. If I can jump in and just respond to some of it, I agree with you that it's going to be a small group of students that are going to violate. Most students, I believe, are going to come back and understand that going to Cornell and Ithaca College and TC3, that's a privilege. It's a tremendous opportunity, and they're going to do what they have to do to continue to take advantage of that. But certainly the fear that bringing 20-some thousand people into our community all at once is going to be a real risk. I think that's a legitimate fear, and we have to be prepared to answer that. Testing is a critical part of that. But as I said, this is the last line of defense. If there are people that just say, no, we don't believe in this, we don't care, we are going to do what we feel we want to do, there has to be a response to that, I believe. And if it's not the police, then we need to figure out how we respond to that. But large, unsupervised parties without masks, that scares me. Anyway, I hear your point. I think we need to be prepared, and we need to be able to show that we have a credible plan ready. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Jason.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add something to think about when we talk about this, and it kind of feeds on, I think, builds off of what a few of you have mentioned. A lot of the focus has been, I think, targeted on students, which is easy to do in a higher ed community like this. Several things I just want to point out. The surge in cases the past few days have been gatherings not of students. They've been of families. They've been non-students gatherings. So I think when we talk about actions and approaches towards gatherings, we need to keep it at that. And I think we acknowledge that, there's a student population, there's a big one, and yes, they gather, but we can't lose sight that any enforcement action we take or approach has to speak to the greater population. It cannot be targeted just at students, because The surge in cases we had on Monday and Tuesday were not related to students. They were related to family members that did not follow the guidance and did not follow what they were supposed to do, and they spread the disease in their family. I just want to put that out there that I agree this conversation sometimes can very easily go down a path of looking at higher ed saying, here's a problem. And there's a challenge with that, and I recognize that, and I'm not belittling it. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the greater population, because that also has to be messaged the same way. Their gatherings in general pose a risk. This is why they were restricted from large gatherings to short ones, to smaller ones. So as we approach this, we have to make sure that we're communicating to the whole community. Having a 50-person party, whether or not it's a student-based party or not, poses risk, and there has to be caution around bringing that many people together for whatever the reason may be. I just offer that for part of the conversation, because it's easy to get down this path. I know it. We've been having it all with higher ed, and the only other thing I want to add to is I do agree that higher ed will have to be part of the communication and enforcement mechanism. It's not solely on law enforcement. It's not solely on environmental health when we talk about a certain body of folks. So that's all I wanted to offer, just perspective.
Good points, Jason. Yeah. Certainly the constituent questions I've gotten have focused on students, but it is broader than that. And the July 4th gathering is, a good reminder to us all. Second bite at the apple. Let's go as quick as we can. Henry?
Yes. What people really want is they want someone to contact, whether it's the health department. If there's a party on Friday night, contacting the health department is not going to do any good. Contacting Cornell is not going to do any good. Contacting the police may in fact have an impact. They just want to hold somebody responsible or someone accountable to do things. And so that's the real question, Mike, is who, again, if there was a party next to you, who would you, and there were 50 some people there, who would you call? Again, the police are the last option. I know I've also been working with two groups, and we're talking about maybe doing a community outreach worker to group to have around, so that there could be, again, maybe not police, but maybe somebody else that can do it. But that's all only development stages now.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll stop there.
Anna.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my previous statement. Jason, you said what I wanted to say, which is, and Mike, that, well, I will just caveat, you probably are all getting inundated by very scared people, and they are prioritizing students. So my comment came from that place, but I really do think that it's important that we clearly communicate that the case surge that we're seeing were not from students. But reiterate that I do feel like it's a matter of time with the uptick in just the size of these large parties. And the other thing, Mike, that you brought up, and I don't know what the solution is for this, but it does seem to me that all the communication that we're doing will never be enough, in prioritizing communication and outreach in this in particular, because of the magnitude of the fear, is utterly critical, both with respect to creating clear guidelines that people can follow, but also outlining the guidelines that have already been established. I know Cornell is trying really hard, and they have done an incredible job in outlining as much as they can what they will do for preventative measures, for education, for enforcement. And it, is everybody's job to try and make sure that everybody is educated about that, and also recognize that we're all going into the unknown and having a bit of patience with everybody. So I just want to say that that's something we're all aware of. I'm certainly aware of it.
Okay. Martha, hold on one second. Matt, you had something you wanted to add?
Thanks, Rich. I think there's two aspects to this. There's enforcement, we've talked a lot about just now, but also identification. And Ann made a good point earlier that, once the party has happened, it's kind of too late. If there's 50 or 75 people without masks in close contact with each other, then the damage has been done in terms of, the potential spread. So I think it's really important to think about the university's role in this. And my understanding is that the universities are making the students sign a contract that they will obey certain rules. They will not do certain things. And frankly, that's the teeth that we have, more so than any appearance ticket or any disorderly conduct charge or any noise violation ticket. The consequences that the school can impose on a student are much more serious and much more significant to a student when they're thinking about what's going to happen to me. Some students disperse when the police come and some don't. And we're going to see all ranges of responses if the police come to a party. But I think the most important thing the police can do is identify the people who are there. And the police can do that either, by taking their names or on body camera, to then go back to the universities and say, okay, here's a list of the people that were at this party. And if they signed contracts that they weren't going to do that kind of thing with the university, then those consequences have meaning to them.
Okay. Martha? Oh, yeah, Martha and then Derek.
Yeah, so can somebody tell me what the phone number is? What's the non-emergency dispatch number people should call?
I think we don't know, Martha, but that's a
Okay,
really good
so
point.
that's-
We need to get it.
We need to get it, we need to publicize it, we need to all know what it is. I didn't know until you just said this, Jason, that party, the 4th of July party was not a student involved party. I think we should really look at our own messaging. This is really going to be critical to lower the fear about students and make people understand it's all of us, because I think there's a real easy way to scapegoat. And students is a more politically correct scapegoat target than many other scapegoat targets that exist. So let's please, maybe we can actually say this in the next press release, that the previous gathering spikes related to gatherings did not involve students, they were permanent residents. And I also want to say that this is only going to get way harder once it's too cold to be outside. So we really got to hammer this home so that people self-police.
Okay, good. Derek?
I was just going to comment on the phone number, but I see somebody just added it to the chat messages, the non-emergency number for dispatch.
Please say it out loud.
273-8000.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
That's always been the non-emergency line for the 911 center. So
I have a different number for that too.
well, yeah, you're probably, Brian can comment if he wants, but I think it's the 272-2444. But I think that's technically an but I'll just say, I mean, we're well adapted at handling party complaints. I mean, we've been doing it probably since 1817. So it shouldn't be an issue for us. Yeah, maybe there'll be more of them. Maybe there'll be more complaints. But I mean, just so everybody's clear, I mean, we do coordinate with our colleges. We do have a representative on the Ithaca College monthly meeting that meets with residents in the area and Ithaca College staff and law enforcement. And we all work together to handle these things when we need to. So in a lot of ways, this is really nothing new to us. It may be different than a noise complaint. It may be a gathering, but we're going to respond the same way for sure. And as long as we're talking about that, the town of Ithaca does have a noise ordinance, unless something has changed, none of the other towns do. I've had a lot of comments from a couple town people reach out to me lately about noise issues, and that is an effective way for us to stop these parties from happening. Again, it's after the fact, but if the county ever wanted to consider any ordinance at all, one that would be most helpful to my office would be a noise ordinance, possibly mirrored off the town of Ithaca's.
Okay, interesting point. All right, well, thank you everybody for contributing on this issue. It's certainly one where more to come is, I think, pretty clear. Let's pick up our agenda. Jonathan, thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay, but I'd wanted to get you in and out if you had other things you needed to do. So thank you. I don't believe there are any changes to the agenda, but let me know if there are. We have minutes from June 18th, 2020. Could I get a motion to put those on the floor? Glenn moved, Anna seconds. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right. Henry,
Oh, yes.
Glenn? Oh, you're muted. Yes, okay, Mike? Anna?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, unanimous. Thank you. The chair's report is really what we just talked about. So I think I don't have anything further other than a comment from my conversation with the sheriff that we seem to be maintaining low jail numbers. We're continuing that. I think, Sheriff, you said you were at 31 today or thereabouts?
Well, we're at 32 actually today. Our state parole ready inmates have left. We do have one new one currently. So yeah, seems like we're continually hovering around the low 30s.
Okay. And it does sound like the state has begun taking people again.
Yeah, like I said, the group that we had held on to for quite some time, they have all been transferred.
Dan, not to put you on the spot, but are you seeing any difference are you able to see the parole people? Are they treating parole any different to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. They're still meeting with people down here, but on Wednesdays, but they meet with them in the parking lot. They're not bringing their parolees into the building. I was just looking at the list, and looks like there were only 2 parole violators admitted to the jail in the month of June, because that's on our list of people the reasons why we don't interview jail intake. So Derek can probably confirm that. It looks like it was 3 in January, 3 in February, 6 in March, 3 in April, 4 in May, and 2 in June.
Okay. So no change you're aware of on violation on policy?
No, they're still doing a lot of field work, and they're still meeting with parolees down at the Human Services building, but they're doing it in the parking lot on Wednesdays.
Okay. Jason, we are up to county administration.
Sure.
Anything going on?
Nothing at all, but I would yield the floor to the district attorney if he has to go.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Matt.
sorry. Right,
I'll be back in like 10 minutes. 10 or 15 minutes.
All right.
So I'll
Pick
be
you up
back.
when you get back. Sorry about that, Matt. I meant to squeeze you in, but okay, Jason.
We're keeping busy, obviously. Just a brief overview of COVID. The past week and a half, things have upticked for a variety of reasons. We've had some new cases. Things around the country have changed a little bit. There's been more open dialogue with higher ed about the return of students, which has created a lot of questions and answers, not only from legislators, but from the public. So that in and of itself has created, an uptick in response. We've started our budget process internally, and then also, we're working on police reform discussions and how do we mold all that. So in general, there's been a lot of things that have been moving at a faster pace this past week and a half. And there's a lot of unknown and, to a certain extent, anxiety related to what's going to happen in the next several weeks, right? So just to kind of give you that overview. 2 things to discuss. One is the police reform update. So we'll go back about a month now. The governor issued Executive Order 203, which identified basically that the chief executive officer of every municipality that has a law enforcement agency is required to submit a plan to, in partnership with the head law enforcement officer of that jurisdiction, to the legislative body for review and adoption that addressed police reform and really looked at reviewing anything from practices to policies with a lens of equity and anti-racism. This was following the murder of George Floyd. So the executive order is the only guidance to date that's been issued by the state. It's a very broad executive order, and initially after talking with Derek and Jen about how to approach it, I suggested perhaps there's an opportunity for us to have some community-wide dialogue, which would involve, all of the law enforcement agencies, their chiefs or their agencies, and the chief executives from those jurisdictions, which I believe are 5 or 6 villages in the city. So we had an initial conversation with them to just kind of talk about process, and not trying to identify how to approach it and get some initial feedback. There was interest of all those parties to participate, and they think a countywide dialogue would be very helpful. It would also probably include some data analysis. We're not exactly sure what, but they were saying, yep, we would be willing to participate, and we think there's a value to having a community-wide discussion. It doesn't prevent them or basically allow them not to submit their own plan, but it can be built off of the work that we do. So through that, Amy and Lisa have really been, I brought Amy and Lisa in really a part of how to help develop the structure and the process of it, primarily because we've got about 5 different things going on right now. We've got COVID, which is kind of overarching everything. If I go back 2 weeks ago, it was quiet. It's not quiet now. We have our budget prep. We're doing a few department head searches. We've got a lot of other things going on, and bringing Amy and Lisa into the discussion was important to be able to help lead the process. We've talked to a few different folks in the community that have had conversations around race, around equity, to try to just field some thoughts about how the process could be structured. Because one of our thoughts, which I think we really want to run with, is rather than create a plan for the community to respond to, we really want to have a plan that's developed in partnership with the community. This really has to be a grassroots approach. We really want to make sure that we're getting engagement from all different aspects of the community. So that's going to also talk about what partners can we bring in that are going to bring credibility to the process and also get to all parts and all populations of the community. So we're in the process now of having several discussions, getting feedback. We talked a little bit to CGATI last month to get their thoughts and process as well. And I would say over the next 1 to 2 weeks, we're going to try to, my expectation is we'll put a scope together, a process together, and identify community partners, and then really start to begin some engagement with some structure behind it. Derek and Jen and I, Amy and Lisa and Dominic, we all met yesterday to kind of go over a little bit more where we are. Several things to bring up that I think are important. One is ensuring that we have law enforcement participation in the process, making sure there's engagement with law enforcement to have buy-in from every element of it, get both supporters and get a good mix and diverse element of opinions in this and diverse elements of feedback in it. And build off of what Derek and Jen have done under their leadership just in the past year and a half, and continue to expand and grow upon that. So it's a very loose structure right now, but I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks to really start to put some things in play and start to engage in some community dialogue, start with some data review, and then start to build from there. And I know it's a broad overview. I don't have all details right now, but as I said, we're balancing a few of the things at the same time while taking on a major undertaking. But we want to do it right, and we want to make sure we're taking our time as we do it and engaging with the community. So that's kind of where we are just with the overview of it. Be happy to take questions, concerns, suggestions as we go through this process.
As it turns out, it does look like we do have some questions, Jason.
I didn't think there would be.
Yeah, this is obviously a pretty big undertaking.
Sure.
Let's jump in, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of back and forth. If you can go as quickly as you can, each person. Martha.
Yeah, thanks very much. Jason, I have not heard the legislature being involved other than reporting out to this committee. I would urge that the chair of the legislature and the chair of the Public Safety Committee be part of this group, be part of the working group, not be reported out later, but actually be in the discussions throughout. Is there any problem with that?
It's a good point, Martha, and obviously the legislature has to adopt the plan. And we're trying to create a process that's going to get all avenues of input into it. So, this is a conversation we're having now, is how do legislators engage in the process, as well as ensuring that that there is a grassroots effort that and that all elements of the community have the ability to participate, help guide it. So I understand what you're saying.
I think the legislature is one of those elements of the community that should be included. Thanks.
Okay, Anna.
Yeah, two things related. One to follow up on Martha's. If we could get a sense of who in the community that you're reaching out to. I think different legislators may have input of groups that may not be on your list to include.
Absolutely.
That would be one way to be involved. And the other is the reprioritization on reducing criminality rather than simply responding to it. So having a preventative approach rather than a treatment approach. And we know from endless amounts of research that, poverty, for example, and homelessness and a lot of public health related issues are at the foundation of criminality. And so, part of the whole defund movement is not necessarily to dismantle, but to redirect the priorities so that we fundamentally decrease criminality. And also reevaluating the parts of the funding that or priorities or requirements that we've put on police that maybe shouldn't have ever been a requirement that police respond to, like mental health cases where it should really be a public health issue. Are those some of the things that are being looked at?
And I can tell you right now, we haven't looked at anything specific, but I think those are things that are going to come up in the conversations, Anna. And I think it's unavoidable to talk about how can we better serve our community versus in terms of the roles of law enforcement, and how do we ensure that the proper service providers are brought in where in the past law enforcement has been that primary response. So I think that's going to be part of the conversation at some point,
including the impact on budget.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. This is developing a plan. To the extent that we're going to be able to understand it in its totality is probably going to take more than a few months to develop. So to the best that we can do it to date in our budget process, we will, but I have a feeling this is going to carry on over into future years and it's not going to happen. I can assure you change will not happen over the next 6 months. It will probably be the foundation being laid for future changes and future things to be talked about and discussed in upcoming months and years, well beyond just the next few.
I hope so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I don't think it's practical to assume that these solutions are going to come, just through this one process. It's there's going to be, I would imagine, multiple steps, and this plan will identify the next steps of phases of things to look at as well. I also have to say this, I think it's going to be unavoidable. It should be unavoidable to think that this is only going to be limited to one department or service in terms of looking at race and anti-racism and systemic racism in one department is not practical. This is a lens that we'll be looking at with all of our departments, and probably most likely we'll also be looking into other elements of the criminal justice system by default. I don't know we're going to be able to avoid. You're not going to avoid that conversation. I don't think you can put together a successful perspective and direction without looking at all of it. So I think those are things that are going to come out of this process at a minimum.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jason.
Henry.
Yes, Jason, Cornell and IC police involved? I know there was a question about whether they'd be involved.
Yeah, they have been part of the conversation, and they said they are more than NTC3, and they're more than willing to participate. I don't think they're obligated under the executive order to create a separate plan. But nonetheless, I know they're going to participate in the process.
Okay, and I didn't hear, are all the other police departments on board?
The approach that we're talking about is really having some community-wide dialogue. They're going to have some specific to their communities and develop plans specific to them. But yes, they want to be part of the larger conversation, which I think is good. I can tell you my colleagues are not approaching it from this perspective across the state, and some are nowhere near, taking it under, seriously as we are as we go through this. So from that perspective, I think we're already in a better position than most communities, because there's interest, there's engagement, and they want it, and they want to be a part of it.
Okay, thanks.
I have Amy and Lisa. They've been participating and really helping lead the process. Do either of you have anything to add to this?
I think you covered it all, Jason. I think at this point, one of the things is we're just in the beginning phases of the process, and we don't exactly have all of the answers yet. I think that's something that's a bit of a challenge for everyone, is we'll be working with all these different stakeholders groups to come up with not only the process, but the answers to the challenges ahead of us, and building off of what we already have established and where we've been and where we want to go.
I agree. I echo that. I don't have anything more to add.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump in with a comment. And Jason, you and I have talked about this. I guess I would object to the governor a little bit in that he seems to have done this with TCOG and shared services, and he's done this again where he's given a policy-making role to you as the chief executive that I believe probably belongs at the legislature. With that said, you didn't tell the governor what to do, so here we are. But I appreciate what you're saying about making sure that the legislature stays involved in this process. I think we're going to need that for ultimately to reach the goals we want to reach. I'd also say just how important I believe it is to get the line police officers engaged in this process, that anything that's imposed from the top without their buy-in, I'm skeptical whether it's really going to stick. That we really do need to make change in some fundamental ways, and having them at the table, I believe is essential. So Martha, or Jason, did you want to respond to that?
I would take it a step further, Rich. Generally, this type of high caliber of a demand or request of municipalities would generally be done through legislation, through laws, and usually there would be more thoughtful process as to how it goes about. Nonetheless, I would just say I don't think any policy authority has been taken away from the legislative body. You as the legislative body still have to approve the plan or disapprove the plan, or not, kick it back to say it needs to change. So I would say you have all of the policy authority that you still retain. The process we go about it needs to ensure that everyone is participating and has influence over it. And I think your point about buy-in is across the board. And that involves both legislators as well as rank and file in law enforcement agencies, and for every spectrum of the community, right? I mean, that's what's going to make it successful. So I understand what you're saying, and I would say just generally these types of decisions are usually done through a legislative process at the state level, not through an executive order.
Yeah, I guess I'd go one step further in responding to say I have some optimism that having gone to the Criminal Justice Alternatives-to-Incarceration Committee for the last couple of years, the support systems that are in place to drive positive change are really here in Tompkins County. We can do some good things, and with the right involvement from the right directions, I think we can get there. So, yeah. Martha.
Yeah, thanks for letting me chime in again. I think whatever the governor had in mind, I think it's a great opportunity for us to do what we want with it. And I think I think we should remember we have a whole lot of data that probably other communities don't have with our CGR report, which is a couple of years out, but we also had a number of studies that were done while Joe was here. So I hope the group will dive into what data we already have and what data we might need. CGR report did a little bit on race and ethnicity but only enough to like tell us that, oh, we really need to dig into this more. So I hope we use those resources that we've already invested in.
I just have one more thing to
Yeah, go
Derek,
ahead.
the sheriff and Jen have been involved in the conversation. I don't know if either of you want to add anything to what we've talked about so far from your perspective. You're on mute, Derek.
No, I agree with what everybody's saying. I can't really add any more to that.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have comments on the police reform update? I thought there'd be a lot more conversation on this issue. It's certainly going to be a long pathway, I believe. But why don't we move along? The next item is discussion of public safety building. And obviously that's going to be impacted by a discussion about budget. Jason, you probably have some thoughts on this.
I have some thoughts on it. You know, we're in the process of updating the capital budget along as we're going through the budget right now. So, you know, the public safety building updates are in the capital budget now. They're a big piece of the capital budget. I would imagine they'll continue to be. Other than what we discussed with the prior reports, over the next 6 weeks, we'll start to develop the capital budget, absent of the legislature saying they don't want to go forward with any improvements to the public safety building, which I wouldn't recommend. I think there needs to be improvements there. We will work it into the capital program and see where we come out at the other end of it. I have not been able to, obviously we just started our budget meetings this week. I'm far from being able to, I've only met with 5 or so departments. We're far from being at a point to where we are starting to put the pieces together, but it's an important piece of the capital plan. And I imagine it'll continue to be an important piece of the capital plan. And, I hope we'll have more to talk about in September for sure.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the public safety building issue? Well, we're a calm committee this month. All right. We're moving on to the sheriff's office. Sheriff, welcome.
Thanks again. Just a couple things. I apologize there wasn't a report attached to the agenda. We do have a staffing change. Ashley, my executive assistant, took a full-time job elsewhere, so we've got a little bit of a transition going on here for ourselves. So hopefully we'll be up and running again by next month. But just a couple things in the jail. I know Henry had asked me last week, and I informed him that visitation would be up and running by this last Thursday. We had a little glitch and a delay, so that started this past Saturday. No contact visitations, but at least they're face-to-face. So we got that going. Also, we've been working with GTL, everything that needs to happen for the inmates to have the tablets that we've been working on. That's been going on. Hopefully we'll have that soon. That will add, again, components for visitation, video visitation, some email stuff, and also access to the Khan Academy and educational programming. On the road patrol side, I think I may have mentioned the stuff we've been adding to our website. We do have a public commendation and complaint form that's on there to make it easier for people to, either commend a deputy or officer or file a complaint if they wish to. We've been working with people at Cornell to have that translated. We're up to like 9 languages now they're working on and putting that. So that's pretty impressive. We are going to be hosting de-escalation training in October that will be open to all law enforcement in the area. We've had a huge response to that. People are already quickly filling up spots to the point where we're kind of concerned of where we're even going to hold this thing. So we're looking forward to that. We've had a lot of conversation about our duty to intervene policy that you're all aware of. We did implement training within our department. It's called something a little different. It's duty to intercede, but it's basically the same thing. Our staff, both in the jail and on the road patrol, have been required to participate in a Lexipol webinar. There's an extensive case law review that goes along with that, and what can happen to somebody if they fail to intervene when they're required to, followed by a quiz. So they have till the end of the month to complete that. And it's really good. I went through it myself. So I think that's everything at this point.
Okay. Mike, did you have something for the sheriff?
I did. It was really more on that police reform update too, just because I've got Joe Wetmore and Andrew Benson have asked me, when you put together, I guess you're going to put together a task force. They'd like to have people included in that. So they kind of wanted me to relay that message on to you. So.
Okay. Yeah, I did read in I think it was the Lansing Star that they were calling upon me to participate in something in Lansing. And, you know, I haven't heard from them directly, but I'm hoping, you know, somehow working with Jason and all that, we can coordinate all that somehow.
That'd be great, because they were talking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it may be difficult if every town calls me in to do their own thing. You know, I'm a little worried about that, but yeah, we certainly don't want anybody left out.
That's literally what I told them, because they wanted to put together like a task force, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Derek's already moving ahead with this. So why don't I talk to him tomorrow since I'm in a meeting with him? Okay. So yeah, if you guys can let us know when you're putting that together, and we can maybe submit people for it or something along those lines, that would be great.
Okay.
All right, Henry.
Yes. Whatever happened to the office in Enfield? The joint procedure, the joint office?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's open now. We just got a couple of computer things we got to get in place and get a phone line hooked up. We're still working on that, but the space is completely ready other than that. And we have a deputy that's been selected to report out of that office, and hopefully that should be happening pretty shortly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Anna?
I guess this is for Jason and Derek. I've had community members, one in particular, a professor who was interested in being in the sort of evaluation that you are all doing required by the state. Are there community members to be part of the review process? Is that possible, not just electeds?
Yeah. Review process, yes. Adoption process rests with the legislature, right? So you have to actually have a public hearing and then adopt it either through resolution or local law. I would just put a broad, so yeah, that rests with the legislature. That can't be passed off. That's something the legislature has to do. I would say if you have interested parties, interest, thoughts, groups, please forward them to Amy and I, and we'll, like I said, the next 2 weeks is an intense planning process for us. Please send them our way, and we can all put it in our thought process as we develop the next steps, like the scope, the structure, and the process, for all means.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else with anything for the sheriff? All right. District Attorney, welcome back, Matt.
Thank you. So I'm sorry I missed the discussion about the task force, but I certainly would hope to be involved and invited to participate in that. And I've reached out to the mayor as well to help to volunteer to serve on his task force. So I'm definitely interested in participating in that process. We are doing more court business now. The courts are moving forward towards opening. There's more in-person court. I just got back from an in-person court appearance in county court on a raise the age case. We now have a grand jury, which we impaneled on Monday very carefully and using a lot of well thought out procedures to keep everyone distant from each other. We actually used 2 different courtrooms to impanel a 23-person grand jury. We'll be using the main courtroom for presentation of cases going forward. So that's a big deal because we'll be able to move the serious cases, felony cases ahead where we haven't been able to for several months. So those are probably the big highlights of my last month, aside from the obvious.
Okay. Any questions for our district attorney? Henry?
Yes, Matt. Well, welcome back. How fully operational is the court? I mean, is it like 75%, 50%?
Which court?
Well, the court system in general.
Well, you've got the town courts that are all very different, and some of them are having in-person appearances and some aren't. So there's a wide range of where they are in terms of their progression. County court, family court, the higher level courts, city court are doing some in-person appearances and more and more. I was just downstairs in county court. Everybody was masked. Everybody was distant. There's a plexiglass screen in between the defendant and the defense attorney at the defense table. So that's the new reality, at least for the time being. So, in terms of percentages, probably 25 or 30%. Everything takes much longer. Everything's more methodical, but it's happening.
Okay, thanks.
Jonathan?
So did you stick me with the raise to age case?
Not yet.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, the raise the age cases initially come to Matt, and then if Matt doesn't keep them, they go to my office. So I was just catching up.
There's a presumption that a case involving a 17 or a 16-year-old should be removed automatically to family court. There are some exceptions to that, but for felony cases, that's what Jonathan's talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. Martha?
Yeah, I'm interested in the courthouse itself. Early on, that was the one county office building where we actually had some positive cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, in addition to actual court proceedings, how are things going with the staffing areas and procedures, spacing, et cetera?
We now, as of, I think, Monday or last week, the court officers take everyone's temperature when they come in the building, including my staff and myself, every morning. And for people from the general public who come in, they're required to answer the questions about whether you've been exposed and where you've traveled and things like that, and to sign in so that we have a record of who's been in the courtroom or courthouse. So I think that right now, it's taken a while to get to this point, but I think right now we're doing things pretty well. And there's Office of Court Administration that is a state agency that controls half or more of the courthouse. And then there's the county agencies, and OCA hasn't always given us a lot of information in a timely manner, but I think more recently they've done a better job at that. And I think, there's not much traffic. People aren't coming into the courthouse unless they really need to be here. So I think that's the way it should be, and it's working pretty well. There's not a lot of people here.
Now, I know that we had positive cases when there were no public going in.
Right.
So is that, and our staff is responsible for maintenance of the facility. I assume that's cleaning as well.
Our facilities, county facilities, is responsible for cleaning the building, but also anytime there's a case or a transition from one case to the next, the court officers, who are state employees, will spray down the table, and they'll spray down any surfaces that are being touched by people. So it's a combined effort, but most of it is our facilities coming in and doing it, the cleaning every night.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Questions for the district attorney? Okay. Seeing none. Brian Robeson, Department of Emergency Response, welcome. You want to unmute? There
Gotcha.
you go.
Yep. Robinson, thank you.
Oh, Robinson, sorry.
That's all right. So you folks should have already gotten the Tomstat report for last month. I can tell you that the call volume is pretty much at a normal pace now. Some of the call classifications are different than the 5-year averages for that month. And there's probably, you should probably be able to figure out some explanations for a lot of them. But I'll answer any questions you may have about them. If not, I've only got a couple of things to report out on. One that, if you look on the website, you'll probably see a press release today. We completed a project for a rehab trailer. That's to be used for emergency and non-emergency events. Requested through our office to be taken to the scene. I can tell you that this project was actually started last year, the end of last year, kind of slowed down during COVID. But we were able to complete it, and we actually got a lot of help from a local business for a lot of the stuff that's in it. So we're certainly grateful to them. The second thing is there's been a little bit of a lull in the EOC up here. Been kind of nice, been kind of quiet. I don't expect that that's going to continue. As a matter of fact, I know it's not going to continue. But in the meantime, we've done some upgrades to the EOC up here, in particular with electronic equipment, the big touchscreen monitors, very big actually. And we anticipate using those, and unfortunately there may be a real cause to use them if things don't go well with COVID. We may have to crank back up the EOC to possibly even a full-time basis. Kind of part and parcel to that, part of the EOC upgrades involved designating a conference room at assessment as a backup EOC. We worked with administration and assessment on this. And through our grant that we got the equipment, we were also able to buy the same equipment for that office, or for that conference room, excuse me. And that may come in handy because of a couple of things. One, it is downtown. So you may be able to use it as an actual EOC. But also you do that kind of in conjunction with one another. That is to say, you could activate an EOC, but still folks, and particularly I'm thinking about folks in administration, could actually be in that location downtown, but functioning as if they were in the room right up here. So at any rate, those are just a couple of the project updates that we have for you.
Thank you, Brian. Henry, you had a question?
Yes. Brian, I was wondering, in the on the Comstat report, is the harassment category racial harassment?
It's not broken down in that way, but yes, there was a bit of an uptick in that. So it could have been, or it could not have been. I'm assuming well, I'm not going to assume anything. But a lot of these things are, let's call it a sign of the times. And I noticed probably a 50% increase in criminal mischiefs, which a lot of times you'll have when you have protests and things of that nature. You guys had been asking about domestics as we continue through COVID. And this is probably a good example of the information's only as good as the caller provides at the time, because if you look at domestic disturbance, it's up quite a bit last month from the 5-year average. But right above it is dispute, which could also be a domestic dispute. And if you add both of those things up, we're like right on par. So some of it's just in the information that's collected at the time.
Okay. I also have two other questions about the, at the end of your report, there's the text to 911 project and also the towing project. I thought the towing project was over.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. The what?
The towing project. At the end of your report, there's a towing project.
Yeah, no, that's not over.
Okay.
No, yeah.
Okay.
We were meeting with law enforcement and the tow companies right about the time that COVID hit, and we've all had different things since then. It's still on the radar, but no, there is no progress on that.
Okay, and also with the 911 to text, that's going to be done pretty soon.
What's the deal with that?
Hi, Henry, it's Jessica. The project is grant funded, and with all the other projects that we've had going on, we've kind of delayed that until start in September, October timeframe. So it will be done by the end of the year.
Okay, thanks.
I had a question, or maybe just a comment. I see on your report that harassment and disorderly conduct are up. And those seem to be sort of a bellwether of other trends. I was wondering if you had any comment on that.
No. I mean, it's a call that comes into the center. No.
Yeah, I certainly worry that people are tired of all the restrictions and that they want to act out a bit.
Could very well be. But at least they're walking and not driving, because you'll see that traffic accidents and traffic accidents with injury are way down.
Yeah,
so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Property checks continue to be way up.
Yep. And they have been right along.
And welfare checks. So I guess those are good that people are.
The one thing, and I go through and kind of highlight these each month in anticipation of some questions, and this shots fired, the average is 10, and it was 31 for the month. That's not a great thing. I don't think.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, as I said, I worry that people are getting restless, and we may see impacts from that. But I guess all we can do at this point is just pay close attention. Any other questions for Brian Robison? Sorry about that, Brian. Seeing none, okay. We are moving through our agenda pretty well here. Department of Probation and Community Justice, Dan Cornell, welcome.
Thank you. We've had some, seeing some, again, slight increases in our workloads. as far as new investigations coming in and new supervision cases. They've been very, very slow for April and May, started to pick up a little bit in June and a little bit in July. Certainly nothing like we would see in a normal year. Through attrition, just through people reaching their maximum expiration dates and completing probation, we're down to 504 criminal court cases currently, which is the lowest it's been in the 20 years I've been here. It was nearly 1,000 probation cases in 1999, and now we're down to half of that. We've currently got 37 investigations. We normally have around 80. So the workload is a little slow, which is good because it's allowing the POs that were furloughed to get caught up on some stuff they weren't able to do when they were 17 hours a week and get caught up with their people. So we should be in good shape when the workflow starts to increase again as the courts reopen. We've made a plan to resume our community service crews as of August 1st. We're going to get the staff back on the 27th. I think I mentioned last time, Cornell did decide to do the dump and run removal of student goods over to the Sears building. There's quite a mountain of things there right now that need to get moved to the Bonton area and sorted out. And again, that's a huge fundraiser for the community and basically funds the bulk of the Cops, Kids, and Toys program to the tune of mid $40,000 every year. I'm sure there's going to be a high need for Cops, Kids, and Toys this year with the job impacts of COVID. So that'll resume. We're going to do it on a smaller scale, try to not have more than 2 participants in a van with each of our crew supervisors, so we can have 2 crew supervisors and 4 individuals working at any given time, because we have to provide the transportation. And if we didn't limit the number of participants, they wouldn't be able to social distance in the vans. So we're working on all of those protocols.
That's the Service Work Alternatives program?
Yes,
Okay.
which is our formal supervised community service program. Friends of the Library has also indicated that they're willing to accept people from outside of their agency back into the building. We generally assist with their preparations for the book sales and things, so we'll be happy to get back in there as well. We're working on expanding our reconstitution of operations plan in anticipation of the possibility of a second wave of COVID-19 and the potential for a second order to limit the density in our office to 50% again or something similar. The first time around, we were not prepared with the technology to allow people to work from home, but we're getting those systems in place so that if, God forbid, there is another round of COVID and we have to limit our people in the building, then we'll be able to still function from home to some degree. That's involves cameras and getting VPNs put onto computers and things of that nature, so that we can maintain the confidentiality of our information.
I had a question, Dan. And just, I assume you're communicating with the district attorney's office and paying attention to the backlog of cases, so you're prepared. And I assume that appears manageable at present when it comes.
The way things are getting resolved now is at a fairly steady pace, so we are okay at the moment. We did talk about it last month's CJAPI meeting, and after that meeting, Mr. Salisbury got in touch with me and said there were around 180 pending misdemeanor cases before Ithaca City Court and the municipal courts. He said that number included violation level offenses, which would not involve our department. So I think we'll be able to handle it as long as things start moving at a relatively at a rate that it's not a floodgate. But either way, we'll deal with what we get.
Okay. Martha Robertson.
And were you still finishing something?
I have a couple more items, but I'm happy to take a question.
Oh, I can wait.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're still trying to figure out how to do day reporting in a safe manner for the participants. But I think by the middle to end of August, we'll be able to resume doing that. I just want to confer with Mr. Krupa about the health implications and social distancing needs. I mean, we're all kind of familiar with that stuff now. I just want to make sure that we're not opening up any doors to have either employees or participants at higher risk of contracting COVID-19. That is, I guess we've heard from BOCES and they are ready, willing, and able to come back. They're one of our contract providers for task and GED classes. So they're willing to come back and provide some programming. We could also allow people access to our computers for telemedicine appointments so they could do initial intakes with mental health, with substance abuse treatment providers, and as well as medical doctors if they had those needs, just to provide that for some of our people who don't have access to the technology now. We do have an implicit bias training scheduled for the entire department. It's a mandatory training from 1 to 5 on Friday the 24th. If anyone would like to sit in on that with us, you're more than welcome. And a couple legislative things. I sat in on a NISAC training yesterday regarding the repeal of 50A because it does impact probation departments and probation officers. And today I learned of a bill submitted by Assemblyman Rosenthal. It's number A10755, if anyone's interested, to amend Section 2.2 of the CPL as well as Section 400 of the penal law, both of which pertain to peace officers being able to possess and carry firearms, which is not an issue here, but it caused quite an uproar with my counterparts around the state. So it's currently a one-house bill, so be monitoring that, and it'll be interesting the impact that has on other county probation departments if it passes. Other than that, we're chugging along. We've got everybody back for probation officers, and we'll have the rest of the staff back on the 27th. So feeling pretty good about where we're at right now.
Thank you, Dan. Sorry for jumping in on the middle of your report there. Martha.
Yeah, and day reporting was one of my questions. So thanks. I love the idea of using the computers there for telehealth. I think that's really wonderful. And I don't know if that can be broadened out safely to sort of former clients of day reporting, but a way to use those resources would be great. You mentioned kind of doing another round of your reconstitution of what do you do with staffing if we go back into another shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
You said that can't remember if that's a coop or a ROOP, whatever it is.
It's a ROOP.
A ROOP. All right. Sounds like a good idea. I don't know if are all departments doing that. I mean, this is maybe a Jason question. I mean, is there? It may seem, well, we already did one of those. It'd be easy enough to go back, but is that something formally that all departments are considering?
Yeah, we actually got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can say, and Amy can probably elaborate more. I know next week, Jay Franklin is going to work with the planning section on pretty much kind of updating coops and ROOPs and touching base with departments and how things are going so far. Amy, do you have anything to elaborate on, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. We've given the instruction to all department heads to start thinking about how they use both of those documents as they come in and out of both COOP and ROOP life. So, yep, that's going on with all departments.
COOP is the continuity of operations plan. So that was kind of as we shut down. ROOP is the reconstitution of operations. That's kind of as we ramp up. So,
yeah, that's what I thought I remembered. So this is sort of going back to COOP. going back to relook at what did we do in a hurry in March and kind of what else. So on a little more advanced planning kind of way, what if we have to shut down, what else should we be doing? So you're starting that next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the seas calm a little bit, we will probably have a much greater exercise and after action review of what worked, what didn't, and really formalize your continuity of operation planning into a much, not like, hey, in 24 hours you got to shut down. A little bit more thoughtfulness behind it and learning from the experience. So this is kind of just preparing for a bad situation should we have to revert back, and what worked, what didn't work. A little bit of a mini kind of midway after action review.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, like I said, when there's calmer seas out there, and however long that takes, I think we will probably have a dedicated process of kind of formalizing and take a little step back from what did we learn from this, and if we have to do it again, how would we change it, and have some more formal planning involved, so that we have an ability to reflect and make it better if we have to do it again.
That sounds really good, and it seems timely because if there are investments we have to make, then we feed that into the budget process.
I mean, it's all part of bigger emergency planning and management planning process. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay.
I did have one more piece that I missed. If I could just take one more minute.
You bet.
We have a lot of people who request travel permits. Our practice is if they're in compliance with their probation conditions, they're up to date on their financial requirements, that we do tend to not restrict travel, given that now there's 22 or 23 states that you have to quarantine from upon return. We've added a blurb to our travel permits indicating to anyone who asks for a travel permit that we will be notifying the health department of their travel to a state that they have to quarantine from. We'll be notifying the health department of the person's name and where they went. So upon their return, if Frank feels the need to check in on people and make sure that they're following through on the 14-day quarantine, you'll have that information. I think in some ways it'll reduce people's desire to make unnecessary trips to other states that are, currently having COVID upticks. So I just wanted to put that out there in case there were any legal reasons that we shouldn't be doing that between Jonathan and Matt, as far as if that puts us at any additional, opens us up for any potential liability issues. We're going to have the people sign a release indicating that they know that the information will be shared with the health department.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Anything else? Okay. Any other questions for probation? I see Lance Salisbury's here. I would just like to check in for a minute and see how assigned counsel is going.
Hi, Rich, can you hear me? I was just unmuting myself.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, that's okay. It took me a second to get the microphone turned on. We're good. We have, all our staff in place. Part of our, reconstitution plan, we were able to bring our new staff person, our data officer, in place. I guess the big news for public safety would be we're finalizing our year 2 budget, that contract amendment on the statewide expansion grant. So here in a few weeks, we'll be able to start accessing that money once it's all signed off, which is good news for us with the state. On that, I think just the other piece of news I think that's useful for you to know is, or you may be aware of this, that's kind of pertaining to all the discussion that's been going on. Matt and I issued a joint statement on structural bias, racism, in the criminal justice system in the last week. I think we thought that was an important statement to put out there. So you're aware of that. I know some of you have said something about it, but that's kind of it for us. We're back to normal. We're seeing, the courts, as Matt said, are starting to reopen. We're seeing the uptick. We're dealing with we're getting a bit of an uptick in client numbers as part of that.
Okay. Any questions for assigned counsel? Comments? Okay, thank you, Lance. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Are any of the committee members or other legislators, do you have anything you wanted to say at the Public Safety Committee? Martha?
Thanks. I'm still unclear which is the right number for people to call for non-emergencies about gatherings they're concerned of. I see 273-8000 and 272-2444. I think we have one phone number that we direct people to that would be best.
So Martha, this is Jessica Verfus. 273-8000 is the main dispatch number for non-emergencies. The other number is a non-emergency sheriff's department line that rings into dispatch. So either number will get you to dispatch.
So,
but Martha, you make a good point, and I think more to come on this, that having a number that we can broadcast to the public so that everybody knows that number is a really good idea. I would favor the 273-8000 because it's much easier to remember. And I would suggest it needs to be part of our communication strategy.
The issue with that is that, I mean, some of them need to go to environmental health. Not all of them need to come into dispatch. The first step is going to be environmental health. And if they can't handle it, especially with regard to a business, for parties, it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, it is an issue for parties. For businesses, it's more clear because that business is going to be there tomorrow too. The party is a thing that comes and goes. And so constituents need to be able to reach somebody on a Saturday or on a Sunday and have a response within.
The 273-8000 line would be the best.
Okay, and those complaints would then get sent to fill in the blank? Is it the sheriff's office? Is that right?
The appropriate law enforcement agency for the jurisdiction of the complaint.
Okay, 273-8000. Thanks so much, Jessica. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mike? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. As we've been sitting here, I got something, I think, from Schuyler County or Seneca County. I mean, they actually have a dedicated, it's like the compliance line, and there's a compliance email. Now, granted, that's not going to help you for parties. I mean, then, yeah, you send them to dispatch, but for this other stuff like this Aldi's and whatever, if you wanted to set something like that up, we would have to put some money toward it to fund somebody to kind of answer those calls. I mean, that's something the legislature wants to do. Certainly something we should talk about sooner rather than later, I would think. So.
No, good point. Okay. Anybody else? Last call. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Henry moved. Mike seconds. Mike? Yes?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
Henry?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Anna? I think we lost Anna, but with the chair, we have four positive votes. I think we can adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for coming this month and contributing. Oh, Henry, you had one more thing? No. Okay. Anyway.
I'll wave goodbye.
All right. Yes, let's wave goodbye, and we'll see you in 1 month. Okay.